Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. We are back with regular shows. Today is Friday, August 16th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
And senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
So much to talk about: domestic, foreign, the economy, socialism, communism, accusations of socialism and communism, appeals to Jewish voters, appeals to Jewish leaders, resignations of university presidents. There's a lot that has gone on, and of course, hostage talks. There's a lot that's gone on in the 4 days that we have been away. So I'm going to take the moderator's privilege of starting not with the most important thing, but maybe with the most trivial thing, but only because I spent 2 hours watching it. And so I feel that in order not to have wasted those 2 hours, we lead with Trump's monologue, performance art press conference yesterday at his golf course in Bedminster, New Jersey. And what struck me about it was that he had a very peculiar combination of a lot of energy and no energy whatsoever. The energy came from a kind of rapid fire monologist delivery. He spoke for, I think, 55 minutes before he took a question. And it was almost as though he did not take a breath. But he was uninvolved in most of what he was saying, or at least half of what he was saying. So that he sounded like, I think I told you guys, he sounded like the part of the drug commercial where they tell you the parts of why you're not supposed to take the drug, or how not to take the drug if there are things you should not take the drug. The part they don't want you to pay much attention to, but that they are legally obliged to have in the ad. So he talked about the economy. He talked about what's wrong with the economy. Which was the purpose of the whole thing. But he only sparked to life when he went off script and started talking about how they were very mean to him and they tried to send him to jail, and he has the right to do personal attacks against Kamala. And like his other speech earlier in the week, he argued with his own text. This is now a new thing. It's like a new form of deconstructionism. It's his own speech that has been put on a teleprompter by his own people, presumably approved by him before it goes on the teleprompter. And then he gets angry at the text and says things like, they say the economy is the most important thing, but I'm not so sure it is. In a speech that was about how the economy is the most important thing. That happened earlier this week. There were several incidences of this in this as well. And he is not the same person he was in 2016. That kind of freak lunatic energy that kind of changed the American political dynamic forever is not really present. He doesn't have the juice in the same way. And given that maybe he needs to reset the race, maybe he doesn't. It was an interesting event because it was agonizing for me to watch. And I'm saying this as somebody people know, not a big fan of his, so I'm allergic to what people loved about him in the first place, or what people admire or even think as performance art he is really good at. So I question my own analysis to a certain degree because none of it pleases me. It's like asking you to review a singer whose voice you hate, right? It's like, how do you know if they have a really good performance or not when you can't stand the sound of it? But I think I'm right that he's just not on his game, whatever his game is. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Well, I only saw snippets. I didn't watch the whole thing. But yeah, there's a kind of late John Tesh, synthesizer music vibe to a lot of his performances lately. And that's a reference that only the old people who listen to us will get.
At Red Rocks West.
Red Rocks West, John Tesh live. but I
And
found
NBA fans. He didn't isn't Tesh the composer of the greatest NBA
that's right.
theme
That's right.
song
Oh
of all
yes,
time?
yes,
Yes.
Oh my
yes,
God, I've
John,
taken us
yes.
down a Tesh rabbit hole. I apologize. But I was struck, not, I agree with you about his performance. It was lackluster. However, the importance of the event was merely the fact that they had it, because it was supposed to be about supporting American Jews, supporting Israel. And the contrast with what was going on with the Kamala Harris campaign on the same day, a lot of celebrities, including Barbara Streisand, having a Jewish Women for Kamala, Zoom call. But at the same time, her campaign manager was meeting in Michigan with people, including a newspaper publisher who thinks Hamas is just great. So the contrast between the two
Right,
campaigns in terms of their support, their extremely vocal,
right.
outspoken denunciation of anti-Semitism on the part of the Trump campaign, however lackluster he said it. He had American and Israeli flags right there behind him in Bedminster, versus what Kamala
Right.
Harris is trying to do, which is thread a needle with her anti-Semitic far left progressive group, which is all geared up. We keep hearing about the excitement for Kamala Harris. You know who's really excited for this convention coming up in Chicago? Her progressive left flank, which is already calling her genocide Kamala, genocide Harris, all this stuff. So I was struck by the fact that she's still trying to thread the needle, whereas at least the Trump campaign comes out and says, anti-Semitism,
Right.
bad. Israel, our ally, let's go forward. He's just not the best messenger these days, as you
Fair
say.
enough. Okay, so there were
Yeah, I
two
just
events, by the way, just to separate them. There was this 2 hour press conference
Right.
thing that then he was outside for, standing outside the portico of the Bedminster Golf Club with goods that had cost more now because of inflation. And then when that was over, he went inside and did this event with Miriam Adelson, the by some degrees the wealthiest Jewish person in the world, and a bunch of Jewish supporters, right, denouncing anti-Semitism and talking about the Democratic Party's threat to the Jews. So this was one event after the other, and I just think it needed to be said. Abe, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I think I find Trump's performance is now completely not engaging, and I think part of what it is, it's not just that he's changed.
And that's a change. That's a change for you, because you
For me,
you
yeah.
have always, and you have
I
found
always
him
at least got a
enjoyable.
kick out of him. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that there's a problem with the campaign in that Trump, when he was effective, was a solution to a specific problem. I think with in 2016, the problem was the well, I was going to say age old, but the entrenched Clinton establishment acceptance sort of facade. And he was there to say no, it's all BS. When Biden was running, he was the sort of solution to they're running a guy who doesn't know what's happening, and they're getting it over on you. They are putting you on. They are playing you for fools. And I don't know what he's the solution to now. The solution to Kamala would be a sort of generic Republican. That's not what he is. So there's a purposelessness to him now that I think comes across.
Yeah, he talks a lot about, he's very upset about Kamala being the nominee because he was really excited to have minority support, and that, he's losing some of that minority support to Kamala for obvious reasons, and it's bothering him, and he talks about it. He gets defensive about winning over black voters and things like that. I think that Trump was like he understood that he was a different kind of politician and a different kind of nominee, but that also is the only way that someone like him can win. He can't win. He can't focus enough to be a generic Republican, and he doesn't care about ideology enough to be a generic Republican. He can only win if the act works to pick up all these other voters, and it was working. And then suddenly it's like Kamala comes in, and it's not just that puts black voters in a tougher position who may be thinking of voting for Trump, but it's also like the campaign is just obsessed with identity. White dudes for Kamala, white women for Kamala, white Brooklyn wine moms for Kamala, white NASCAR dads for Kamala, everything for. And so all of a sudden, Trump sort of loses that ability to cross over because Kamala is running a campaign where she can just come out and say it. Biden couldn't come out, and Biden tried every so often and it sounded strange, but I think that Trump has been disrupted, to use the word.
He has been totally disrupted, and the central problem for him is that they're behind, not in the race, because they may not be. It's like a 1-point race even now, but they're behind on where Kamala is going, and they are fighting the last war. So inflation, number one issue in the United States economically for the last 3 years, maybe fading a little bit. She just threw chum in the water for him like nobody's business. Today, we are going to hear these economic proposals from her that are radical and psychotic and self-defeating and inflationary and destructive of private property, home ownership, the ability of people to sell their own homes and rent out spaces and things like that. And so the prosecution of the case against her just got easier, but he can't even sell the inflation case. That's the weird part. Even though it appears there was a very good inflation report, inflation, it may well be that inflation is broken. That doesn't mean he can't run on how they brought you inflation. And he could run on they brought you inflation before, and they're about to bring you inflation back in a big way. But as the event yesterday revealed, he doesn't have the juice behind the inflation argument. There are things that he seems to care about, like energy and fracking, that are things that he thinks are important. But like all rich people, inflation doesn't hit him. He doesn't have a personal experience of it. He doesn't know what it means. And so he doesn't, because of that, because he is a solipsistic person who needs to feel it himself in order to get the passion up, he can stand there and say Cheerios cost $3 and now they cost $6. But even as he's doing it, it's almost like, here's what I'm reading off the teleprompter.
But yeah, this is why I remember a while ago, Abe very wisely pointed out how Trump has always been a movement versus sort of an issues-based candidate. And what I think Kamala Harris's entrance into the race has done, because she refuses to take a position on any issue, and we will start to see her have to do that, as you say, particularly today with the economic stuff and at the convention. I think she'll still keep it vague and vibe focused because that's worked for her. He then has to respond to someone who is trying to become a movement when he himself used to be that, and he's bad on issues. And so for those white working class voters who care deeply about inflation and housing costs, who are in all these swing states like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Nevada and Georgia, he is still selling his movement Trumpism, but he's already got those voters. The ones he needs to persuade, like the optimism of the Harris campaign. They really do. I mean, they don't like the backward looking, I'm running the 2020 campaign reboot again from Trump, and he's not speaking on those issues to them, despite putting all those goods out there and pointing to them, as you say.
Like I say, not just a generic Republican, but a fairly conventional politician would have no trouble defining Kamala as a radical progressive who is whoring after swing state voters. Her proposals include, she is now going to propose some form of federal legislation against price gouging. What is price gouging? Price gouging is the act of raising prices in a relatively free market by producers and distributors because their costs have increased and they are trying to pass along the cost of the increase to their buyers, who would then share in some fashion in the price increases that they are paying. So you can call that price gouging, and there are cases of actual price gouging in certain kinds of markets, though they are really not consumer markets. Price gouging takes place when you have a single supplier of something and the single supplier says, I'm raising prices 15%, and you're not going to be able to get what you need unless you pay me 15 or 20% more, because I would like more profit and I have you cornered, or 100% more, or something like that. When the price of eggs goes up, it's not because supermarkets are trying to gouge you. Supermarkets have a 1 or 2% profit margin, period. They are trying not to lose money and therefore close their doors, right? So this is not a complicated argument for people to make. Most people are both consumers and producers in some fashion. They both work, they both go to the supermarket and buy things, and they also work for businesses, unless they work in the public sector, that have to contend with forces that help set how much money they can charge, their company can charge.
Harris and Waltz neither have private sector experience,
right.
which I think
and that is a
notable.
very important point. And again, hands Trump another issue, which is, I know how this works. When the price of steel goes up, and I build a building, I have to set the price of the apartments that I'm selling in that building higher to deal with the expenses that I incurred in building it, or something like that. It's not hard to explain, and Americans and Trump can also, he wants to call her a socialist, he wants to call her a communist. Setting prices is socialism. That's top-down, government-imposed fiats on the free exchange of goods among citizens. There is nothing more defining than that.
And he should really be able to do anything having to do with real estate.
Right.
He's Donald Trump, right? So the 25K toward a down payment and other things these ideas that she's got specifically on housing, he knows what creates more housing and what prevents the creation of more housing. That's like in his blood. He couldn't forget that sort of thing if he tried, and he's not out there saying any of this stuff, and I don't think will be, but that's like literally his wheelhouse.
But younger generations of voters like socialism. We need to make sure we like.
No, everybody likes
Trump is stuff. Sounding old, but they don't see. They actually like socialism.
Giving free
they
stuff.
Like socialism. They're not. They do not have the. They do not associate it with the communist 20th century.
Right. I'm not saying that. I think it's stupid to call her a socialist or a communist. Don't get me wrong, but he's doing it. So if he wanted to put meat on the bones, she's supplying him with the meat and saying, you know what? A lot of people don't like socialism. You want to know why? Here's why. When they say they're giving you a $25,000 subvention to help you buy your first home, however that would work, since it would be unworkable, and the level of fraud that could be incurred by changing your middle initial on a loan form so that you appear to be a different person and bought a second house with the $25,000 subvention. That's just one of the 250,000 different things wrong with it, including the fact that it's instantly inflationary. In other words, that $25,000 is then simply added to the price of the house. If it cost $200,000, it will now cost $225,000, because every other house will. It's not like it'll go, this is great, we're going to build a lot more housing because everybody is going to get a $25,000 down payment. That's not the way it works. You, as Trump knows, or as Seth is alluding to, you make it possible to build housing by lowering the cost of building housing, not by making it easier to get a loan or to lower the loan payments that someone is going to pay to buy the house. The problem in the United States is not that people don't want to buy a house or that they're priced out of the market exactly. It's that there are too few homes right now in the United States for sale, or there aren't enough to keep the prices competitive. And this is one of the things that has gone up in price as mortgage prices have gone up. Now they may be falling. This is, again, not a hard argument to make. Any conventional politician could make it, but he is not a conventional.
And every economist who's left of center is making that argument now.
Yeah, well,
Like
they
in other
know.
words, there's really no one in the professional economy world, no one who would defend a plan like this. It just
Right. Well,
build more
there
housing.
are. You'll
That
find you'll find people in the next five
maybe,
days
yeah,
who
I
will
guess so.
surprise you
Yeah.
with their ability to. And then you have like actual
I'll-
socialist or communist economist Nobel Prize like Joseph Stiglitz, who will I'm sure will come up with some argument to support this, but because he likes Venezuela's economic policies or has in the past. I think the thing is that he also wants to give free stuff away. What did he do? He said no taxes on tips. Why did he do that? Because the Nevada economy, enormous numbers of workers in Nevada, a swing state, get tips as a significant part of their income. So he just proposed for them 100% tax cut on part of their income. That is, it's almost of necessity unjust, because why are tips not taxed but income is? Like that doesn't make sense, particularly if it's income. But that's the whole point, is we need to help you with your income, so we're going to cut. He wants to give things away, and the Democrats have now spent 3 years desperately trying to give money away to people who go to college or have been to college, in student loan subventions and debt forgiveness and all of that. He wants to do taxes on tips, and he has some plan to save Social Security, which I'm sure will involve some form of subsidy. So he's put himself in a bad spot to make the argument that she is doing things that betray the free market, because he just did it himself, or betray elementary fairness to the suffering American middle class. Because why do people who work in restaurants get a tax break, but people who work on a factory floor don't?
But she's also been very savvy, because once again, she's kind of adopting some of the more conservative policies. She's also taken on Vance's increase the child tax credit thing too. So there are ways in which she's tacking more to the center and stealing from him a lot of the thunder he could have on some of the policy proposals that conservatives and swing voters would like to hear from him.
Right. Well, I mean, that's also an important point, right? Because there is this. I don't think they're that laser focused, sophisticated on the contradictions and battles within the American right. But yeah, Vance and the NatCons and the SoCons, as they're called now, have adopted anti-free market rhetoric and policies relating particularly to families and other things, and not to broader macroeconomic approaches like tax cutting, regulatory reform, all of that they are saying all of that is just neoliberalism. What we need to do is privilege families. We need to provide incentives for parents to stay home or to have children or whatever. And the classic conservative market thing is that's not what you do. You make the economy bigger, you make the country more prosperous, and then people will do with that information what it is within their rights to do, because we are a free people and we're not supposed to be manipulated by our government. And that's part of conservative economic theory, is that every time you go into the market in a big way with a social policy intended to be helpful to the larger society, you distort the economy and the larger society, like the mortgage interest deduction, which began in like 1958 and has not really been a good policy, because the level of home ownership in the United States since 1958 has only gone up like 5% of where it was in 1958. The idea this was going to encourage people to buy homes and all of that has actually proven false, because if you hadn't had the mortgage interest deduction, home prices would be way lower and people could pay off their loans without having interest that they then go to their H&R Block and have them write off the bottom line of their taxes. So This
But
is
she
again
does.
not a yeah.
Again, I'm playing
Yeah.
Harris
Yeah. No,
campaign
good.
devil's advocate today
Good.
because there is something quite savvy about the way they're talking about a lot of these policies. The price gouging, for example, that's really smart. She wants to actually do price controls, but she's saying, I'm protecting you, the average Joe, from, the price gouging that these greedy corporations are engaged in. When you go to the grocery store, we're going to make sure you pay what's fair. And I mean, it's very compelling because the swing voter looks at his or her grocery bill and goes, yeah, whatever that she's claiming about inflation, I'm not feeling that. I'm still feeling the cost of my grocery bill. So for her, she's doing a kind of Trumpian thing here. She's like, I'm out here fighting for you, the normal little guy, and I'm going to take on these terrible conglomerates that are gouging you. No evidence that that's actually happening, of course, but that is the message, and I think it resonates.
But also, it works in part because she's mixing it with moving to the right on other things, right? In other words, it's harder to pin her down, where she thinks it will be harder to pin her down, and she's probably right, as a far left extremist, while her first round of ads was all about, I'm going to close the border. I'm going to shut it down. Shut that border down.
Right.
And I prosecuted border jumpers. I'll throw them in jail. I'll build a wall. I'll put nukes on the border. I'll stand on the border myself with an AK-47. Like this is how the reset for Kamala was, I'm a border hawk. I'm a prosecutor. No one is above the law, and no one is coming in or leaving this country, stuff like that. And so then that sort of makes the space probably for her to do things like, well, I'll give you $25,000 also.
But it's so nervy. That's what's interesting. And this is where the protection of the media, this gauntlet that she doesn't have to run of simply being asked elementary questions has gotten her, which is, and Trump is trying to say this, but he has gotten incoherent. Whose policies is she changing on day one?
Her own, right?
It's the Biden-Harris administration. Now, George H.W. Bush, running for president in 1988, did not diverge from Reagan in terms of policy. He diverged from Reagan in terms of tone. His promise was America had gotten ugly and competitive and a little, like greedy or something. So he was going to make this a kinder, gentler nation, which if you think about it is kind of horrifying when you really go back in time and think like, what is the...
And we like Gordon Gekko, damn it.
We need to be a kinder, gentler nation, right? So, but he didn't say what we were doing hurt and we need to change direction in our new administration. We did great. Tonally, there are some issues. Spiritually, there may be some issues that we can address. She's saying she's changing policy from the administrations she's serving to help people because this administration implicitly has hurt them.
And Biden is saying, no, she's not going to do that. At the same time, yesterday, he told some reporters, when they said, what about her changing your economic policy? He said, no, she won't. So she's also got to deal with him.
Yeah.
No daylight.
So it's a very nervy thing she's doing. I mean, it's like the chutzpah, the famous definition of chutzpah is you kill your parents and then you throw yourself on the mercy of the court saying you're an orphan. So she becomes the nominee of the party with no difficulty whatsoever. No, she didn't have to run for it. She didn't have to do anything. And now she's saying, I was just incepted. I was incepted into existence on July 15th. And now I just have no responsibility for anything that happened. I am an alien who was, teleported down to America to save you.
But the challenge is here, I think, for Trump is that people don't want to be disabused of the Kamala fantasy for whatever reason. I think because they were so upset about Biden that they just want to hang on to this. Hillary Clinton, this just going back to when Trump has an opening and when he can sort of thrive. There was something about Hillary Clinton people wanted to push her away. People were saying they wanted to know the truth. They wanted to
come
say,
on, she was likable enough, Abe.
Yeah. No, but they were like, you know what? She's been like cackling in my ear a little too long, and I don't trust her or her husband exactly. There's something about her that I don't trust, and that was an opportunity. People really began to resent the Biden story, the narrative that he was in tip top shape, even when they could see with their own eyes that he didn't know where to step, he didn't know what to say, he didn't know what was going on. People wanted to know the truth.
Yeah.
People don't want to know the truth about
So you're saying they
Kamala,
were gaslit then, and they got it. They got that they were being gaslit about Biden's brain, and now they're being gaslit.
And they're
No, there's
okay with it.
self-delusion. Now it's self-delusion.
It's self-delusion.
Okay.
With
Well,
some
again,
media assistance.
we have a problem
yes.
with the they here because
by they,
in other words, Democrats who were disheartened and destroyed by where this was going have now.
And I think some independents.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Nonetheless, we've seen this reversal, right? As Matt Gonetti, our colleague, has said, like for 4 months or 6 months or something like that, Trump started to open up a small lead, and that's gone. That's gone. Whatever it was that allowed that to happen, she has eliminated. That is, and so you can now infer that it was all Biden, that it was entirely Biden. The removal of Biden and the replacement by her just means that what they were responding to wasn't they wanted Trump back. It was, we can't, this senile guy I'm looking at, I can't vote for him. I can't vote for him. I'm not going to answer pollsters. If I'm not going to vote for Trump, I'm not going to talk to pollsters. I'm just not going to answer the phone. And I'm an independent. Begrudgingly, I'll say, well, I guess I got to vote for Trump. Things weren't so bad when he was president. And I had to look at this guy. This is terrible. So that's over with. But it's not like she is pulling ahead. She's had a month. And by the way, poll reversals over a month are real. Like that's, so she's had a poll
Hillary was like 7 points ahead of Trump at this time in like 26, right? Yeah. I mean, she was way ahead of him at this
point. September is when it closed. Yeah.
Anyway, as Dave Weigel puts it, Trump is polling better now than he has ever polled.
This point in the race.
No, period. He is polling better now than he ever polled in 2016 or 2020. And relative and also absolutely, I think. I mean, he's polling at 45, 46, 47. He never polled there. He got 46% of the vote twice, but he never polled there. So Trump, she isn't eating into Trump, it appears. And she is getting the enthusiasm. So she is the enthusiasm gap is now gone and all of that. But she's not like running away with the race. So that's the other interesting aspect of this, which is she's trying to do something nervy and it's working enough. So when, Abe, you say people want to be gaslit, Democrats want to believe that they have been delivered and that she is a savior, that they and America has been delivered from the horror that was going to face them in November 2024. And I think that's true, right? I mean, she's not senile. So there's not going to be a senile president after 2024. That's a pretty low baseline for electing someone president. But when that was the alternative, was a senile guy versus a non-senile guy, in the end, it wasn't even like Fetterman and Oz, because Fetterman had a stroke, but you can recover, as we have seen. You can recover from a stroke, I guess, is kind of the argument that you would make. He wasn't permanently brain damaged, or that, he had made the case for years and gotten the thing right. Biden wasn't ever going to get better. So they're relieved, but I don't know that America wants to be gaslit. That's the challenge to Trump. But you can't challenge Trump because he's not listening.
Well, I think the other thing
with his own teleprompter is my point. They're trying to put normal Republican rhetoric on the teleprompter, and then he says, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about Judge Mersham. I want to talk about how they're very unfair to me. I want to talk about other things. And, you know, have you ever like had an elderly, like egotistical friend, like an elderly egotist? So their world shrinks, even though he is, and the egotism like becomes 95% of the defining quality of their conversations. And I was listening to him thinking, if I were like one of his daughters-in-law, or if I were Jared or something like that, like, and I was at the dinner table, I would like get up and go into the other room. Like I couldn't listen for another 5 minutes. And I love the guy, but I can't listen to this anymore. He's saying I listen
now you
to,
understand Melania. I just
yeah, exactly. Like it's like, oh my God, stop talking. Stop. I can't take it.
There's one other thing, though, that I think we should say that the Harris campaign has done well and smartly, and that is that they have moved away from "this is the end of the world" rhetoric and "this is the end of democracy" rhetoric, which is, part of the supposed horror of the Biden versus Trump election was that you had senility versus fascism. That's what people were. That's like the buzzwords that each side was using, right? That guy's a fascist, and then on this side they would say that guy is senile. And so it didn't feel like you could really make that argument, but they tried. Like the Biden's team making the "nothing is more important than this election because democracy" argument was sounded kind of silly coming from him, not just because there had been this 3.5 year cover up of the fact that he was, had barely hanging on, but also voters are sick of it. It is the third election in a row that Donald Trump has run in. So the first election that Donald Trump ran in was not the last election, because then Donald Trump ran again. And when Donald Trump ran again, he was in control of the government and he lost. And now he's running for the third time. So people are just tired of hearing this is the last vote you'll ever cast.
Right.
And Kamala recognized that and completely eliminated.
Pivoted to joy. She pivoted to
all
joy.
That stuff.
Right?
Yeah, it's gone. All that stuff is gone.
I don't know what she recognized or not. There must have been $100 million in research on the Democratic side that told them that the minute that she took the reins from Biden, that the Biden message was harming Democrats as much as it was as helping, right? Which is, you can bank that Democrats think that Trump is a threat to democracy. You may not be able to convince independents and Republicans to change their minds about whether he's a threat to democracy. Go somewhere else. But Biden had nothing else. It was, do you think I'm senile? He's worse. That's kind of implicitly where he was going, right? Was, I may be a vegetable, but he's cyanide. So do you want a vegetable, or do you want to eat a vegetable, or do you want to ingest cyanide? And that's a good way of getting people to want to, basically
but
jump off a cliff.
So her whole glow up, as they call it, is not just her rhetoric. She's literally wearing brighter colors. She's smiling. She's very optimistic.
She went from being an autumn.
Rallies.
She went from being a winter to a spring.
An autumn to a spring. Yes, yeah. Totally. The color wheel. But here's the funny thing: there was this moment where Trump, he's incapable of this, but if he'd listened to his handlers, he could have emerged from his near-death experience and totally pivoted in his tone too. He could have been like, you know what? Let's look forward. I've been given this opportunity. I've been given a second chance. The whole country, we need to move away from all the COVID, all the bad stuff that happened. And here's an optimistic vision for a conservative future. He's not a conservative, so he can't really give us that, but he could have done a version of that. He could have done a reboot. And I think a lot of his bitterness about Harris is seeing that the reboot has actually worked for her, at least, in the near term.
Okay, so I'll tell you a story. 1988, Bush is supposedly behind Dukakis by 17. Now, the late and highly controversial, and for good reason, Roger Ailes once told me this story, which is that it was after the Democratic convention. Dukakis supposedly had a successful convention. One poll had him up by 17. And Ailes said, we got to go negative fast. And Barbara Bush was like, I don't believe in negative campaigning. And I think this is terrible. And George, you must make sure not to do that. And they were in a sort of room together. And Bush is like, I don't like it either. And, when I went negative against Reagan, it didn't help me. It hurt me. And so I think that Barbara has a point. And Ailes said, do you want to lose? Do you want to lose? Because I can construct for you a wonderful campaign that will speak to the highest and most noblest aspirations of the American people, and you will lose. This is politics 101. We have to go negative now. We have to define Dukakis as a Massachusetts leftist who lets out prisoners who kill people, who supports the growth of endive lettuce, and who actually said he was helping the economy, the environment in Massachusetts Bay, and wasn't. So that's what we have to do. So if you want to, and Bush, who was an extraordinarily competitive person, said, you're right, and they changed the campaign. That was Ailes's account of the session where they sat down to figure out what to do from Labor Day until November. So Trump has people who could say to him, you want to lose, you're on a losing trajectory. The difference is Trump will say, I'm bringing in Corey Lewandowski because I like him and he says I'm great and that I don't have to change anything. He doesn't want to do what is obvious that he needs to do. So everybody's saying, if only he'd do this. It's like, stop saying it. It's like telling, it's like telling, and well, I'm not going to go. I had an analogy to obese people. I'm not going to use. So anyway, which I'm very overweight myself, so I feel like I would have the right to do that, but it's more offensive than I should go with. But he's not going to change. He's not going to change. He doesn't want. He could. The whole thing. He's at 78. He's not going to change. Yeah, facing an enormous historical humiliation for the second time. This is why people don't do things like run for president again when they lose once. It's like, that was the worst thing that ever happened to me in the history of the world, and I'm never going to do that again. That's why Gordon ran in 2004. It's why Dukakis never ran for office again. It's why you don't do it. Carter never ran. It's too painful. It's a public death, Kitty Dukakis called her husband's defeat in 1988. And there he is doing it. So he's not going to change because a normal person wouldn't have done it in the first place. So let me take a minute and talk to you about our advertiser today, Spotify. Creating really great retail experiences is tough, especially with multiple stores, teams of staff, fulfillment centers, separate workflows. It's a lot, but with Shopify Point of Sale, you can do it all without complexity. Shopify's point of sale system is a unified command center for your retail business. It brings together in-store and online operations, even across 1,000 locations. Imagine being able to guarantee that shopping is just always convenient. It's all simpler. Whether you're in an aisle, ship to customer, buy online, pick up in store, customers can shop how and where they want and have staff with tools to help them close the sale every time. And let's face it, acquiring new customers is expensive. With Shopify Point of Sale, you can keep existing custom shoppers coming back to your stores with consistent, tailored experiences and first-party data that give marketing teams a competitive edge. Want more? Check out at shopify.com/commentary, all lowercase commentary, and learn how to create the best retail experiences without complexity. Shopify.com/commentary. So, like Trump, I went on for 92 minutes, and we've shortchanged all kinds of other stuff. Seth, hostage deal. Quickly. Last week, I assumed there was a hostage deal because the three, Egypt, America, and Qatar, said, we're going to have a meeting on Tuesday, the 15th, and it's going to be great, and there's going to be a hostage, and we're going to end this thing. Then you get ridiculous things that happen, like Hamas saying they're not going to come to the hostage negotiations. And there are headlines about this. Hamas has never been at the hostage negotiations. Israel will not negotiate with Hamas, nor will the United States. We don't negotiate with Hamas. So that was a 2-day news cycle where Hamas is refusing to participate in the hostage negotiations. There was a hostage negotiation in November. Hamas was not part of. though, of course, it had an intermediary serving its interest or being its negotiating partner. So that happened, and now they're there, and I can't tell whether it turns out that there is going to be a hostage deal, but they're just dealing with the terms, or whether that letter, like everything else that this administration has done since December of 2023 in relation to this, is an act of moral, political, strategic, and practical idiocy.
Well,
That
the
they
Times of
sent
Israel
this letter
reported
out
the other
without having it. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Right. The Times of Israel reported something interesting the other day, which was that the speech that Joe Biden gave in May, where he outlined the deal, the hostage deal, that he said was essentially Israel's proposal and whatever. That speech was supposed to be a much wider speech, sort of bossing Israel around and telling them you've got a choice between isolation and whatever. He used those words in the speech, but apparently the speech was changed because just before 2 days before he was giving the speech, the Israelis came back with a plan and a proposal for the deal, and so he sort of switched it up. But what you can see is that there's the default. The default is Israel is holding things up, and every time that things stagnate, it just reverts to the default. Well, Israel is holding things up, and normally that pushes Hamas away from the table because why would they strike a deal? The one interesting thing about this particular delay is that it's also apparently delaying an Iranian, whatever it's going to be, attack on Israel. The Iranians have been saying for weeks they were going to respond to Israel's assassination or alleged assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas chief, in Tehran. And then they said at one point, they said maybe we're going to do it on Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of Av, which is a day of mourning and sadness in Jewish history, and bad things happen, just for the symbolism of it. And then that day came and went.
That was Monday night, Tuesday. That was right. This week, Tuesday this week.
And so, we're here and we hear from people, I'm sure viewers at home do too. They hear from their friends or family in Israel every day. It's like they hear from somebody who says, well, we think it's going to be tonight, and everybody's sort of guessing, when is Iran going to attack? That's what everybody was waiting for. And the hostage deal, the Qataris have been telling Iran, just wait, hold off, and see what we can get done here. And so now there's a strange sort of calm to the fact that the negotiations are just stringing along, because Israel just did a second evacuation in an area of Gaza today, where they're sending troops back into, and they're doing another operation. So there's no pause until there's an agreement. And so normally you have the situation where, well, Hamas is going to drag it out because they have no reason to agree to it. And now there's a kind of weird factor that Iran looks like a scaredy cat until they do whatever they're going to claim is done in response. And they're being pressured not to do that while these talks are going on. So it's like a weird, peaceful interlude in which Israel is still getting a chance to do what it's doing in Gaza.
Right. Now, it's not a peaceful interlude because, Israel is moving ahead in Gaza. Why? Couple of reasons, one of which is they can, and the pressure is on in Israel to win, obviously, and Hezbollah is still firing intermittently at the north, and presumably they are getting the amount of intelligence that they are now getting from captured soldiers whom they're interrogating is getting better and better, which means that they can pinpoint things that they couldn't pinpoint before. And they keep finding out things, clearing out a little area of Khan Yunis, which was pacified 6 months ago, and going in and digging out and finding commanders and things like that. Story in the New York Times on Wednesday, Abe, that said, Israel, guess what? According to American officials, Israel has done fantastically well in Gaza. They have achieved every military aim that they could possibly have achieved, according to American officials who doubted they would achieve any military aims back in November or December. But now there are no targets left. They got nothing to do. They're done. So they better negotiate a deal and stop fighting. So first of all, let me ask you this. Number one, if this is true and that American officials thought that Israel was going on a fool's errand in Gaza, but are now surprised by how well Israel has done, why would Israel listen to American officials who say now, it's enough. You've done everything you could do. It's like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You told us that we had no plan that would work, and the plans worked. We're on the verge of destroying Hamas. So go pound sand, you losers. Like, who are you? You're the people who pulled out of Afghanistan and aren't helping Ukraine enough. So pardon us if we don't listen to you.
Well, but there's an argument to be made, because this talk of this had begun in Israel a month or so ago by Israeli military brass saying, look, we are doing an unbelievably good job now in Gaza. We have really gotten our footing here. We know what's going on. We are running out of targets. So if you, to the government, saying to the Israeli government, if you want to say we're interested in some kind of ceasefire, you can kind of do it now, knowing that we have gotten operational control. We are running low on targets, and we are still going to see. This is the tricky part. This is the sort of language game. We're still going to reserve the right to take out our enemies when they pop up, but that's sort of separate from the ceasefire. From the ceasefire. The ceasefire.
Whatever happened to the peacefire?
Yeah.
Mostly peaceful fire.
From the ceasefire. So, in some sense, there's reason to believe that at least by some parties in Israel, this is a narrative they want out there.
So there, of course, is an immense political conflict inside Israel and inside the Israeli government, and the pressure of the hostage families and everybody in Israel who hates Bibi, from his former colleagues on the right to everybody from the center to the left, actually annoyed that he might be able to claim victory. So they're saying he can't claim victory. It's not going to work, or he's not doing the hostages right, and all of that. And all that, we don't know. We don't know where everything is. What we do know is that America is in Qatar right now, in Doha, negotiating in some fashion or other over the release of the hostages. And here are the terms that Israel is demanding. We would like our hostages alive, please. Like, we want the living hostages, not the bodies. And apparently Hamas has not agreed to that yet. We would like as many of them as possible, or we're not going to give you any prisoners back. And Hamas is saying, you need to end the war, leave us in place, and we'll give you whatever we want to give you. So they're basically, if what we're hearing is true, there won't be a hostage deal, because there's no deal to be had, because they're not willing to guarantee that they will let the living hostages out. And Bibi will be blamed by the people who want to blame Bibi. And the American government is, meanwhile, twice a day now issuing denunciations of ministers inside the Israeli government for their domestic behavior. Now, I hold no brief for the people who are getting criticized, and some terrible things are happening on the West Bank with rampaging, Israelis going after Palestinians in the last couple of days. But when in the history of the United States has like the Kamala Harris's spokesman and then the spokesman at the State Department attacked a minister of another government? A minister. I've never heard of such, like, it's unheard of. Like, and why are they doing it? Because Kamala Harris's campaign manager is meeting with the guy in Detroit who supports Hamas. They're doing it in a very ineffectual, overly considered pattern to kind of signal to the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian left that they're not bad. they don't like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich any more than you do. And it's like, they don't dislike Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. They dislike every Jew on the planet Earth. Saying you don't like 2 Jews in Israel is not sufficient to garner the endorsement of CARE and Students for Justice in Palestine and whoever this
most Jews dislike
is.
more than 2 Jews in Israel.
That's right. Anyway, I just think it's kind of an amazing thing to see, and it goes to the point that Trump had this session last night. So Trump has a session reminding Jews that he actually has policies that he intends to implement as president that will fight the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States, including a very interesting one. I'm not quite sure how it would work, but it is theoretical that a college that does what UCLA was found to have done the other day, right, by a judge, which is that it did not work to ensure free access to the campus of UCLA, a state school, to Jewish students, that it permitted their free exercise of walking on campus. It allowed groups to prevent that from happening, that this is something that cannot happen in America. It's unconscionable, and they will be held accountable. And other schools may now, this may be a precedent for other schools. And Trump said, what we want to do is if a school does this, it will have its accreditation taken away. That is how you kill a school. Accreditation is the actual is the explicit official granting of degrees. Particularly public universities, they are accredited by the state. Universities are accredited by states as part of their nonprofit status and all this. That is not a dismissible proposal. It's not really a federal proposal, but it is not a dismissible proposal. And he's actually acting to do something in wake not only of that UCLA decision, but of course the resignation of our good friend Minouche Shafik, the president of Colombia. Any thoughts on Minouche Shafik? We talked about her for a long time.
And she was like it was sort of the academic version of a Friday political news dump, right? It's right before classes are about to start. It's a time on campus with a lot of transition. She leaves. She obviously could have left much sooner. She was not considered to be doing a very good job. But I assume it comes down to fundraising. It comes down to bad PR, bad fundraising, and she probably didn't have a plan going forward to dealing with what are sure to be a return of these encampments on college campuses in the fall.
How about this? How about she's curled up in a fetal position for 3 months and school's about to start and she's like, I can't go back there.
Could also be
I can't go back there. I can't go back there. I can't go back there. I find me an island. I'm going to go to New Caledonia. I can't go back there. I can't go back there. I'm sort of there. Plus,
Seth had a good piece on this yesterday about there's no shortage of places for her to go back to, probably, right?
Yeah.
She already has a job.
I mean, Claudine Gay landed
that
very
was the
comfortably.
Thing. She got an offer from the British Foreign Ministry, and she took it, and she's fleeing the country.
Right.
She's not just
gotta get out of
going
here.
back to New York. I'm not getting out of America. I'm going back to Britain. And she's never.
Yeah.
This is
there. They know how to deal with Jews.
And this is the larger problem of there's no way to everybody fails up in this world. You get to a certain level, right? Where you're this technocratic, you're part of the technocratic class, and you can only fail up. I mean, every time there's a Democratic administration here, we have to hear about Wendy Sherman, right? Leading the negotiations with so-and-so. This is the Wendy Sherman who wrote in her own autobiography that she broke down in tears in the room with the Iranians because they were being so intransigent. And she thinks that actually worked. She thinks that crying were one of the advantages, she said, of being a woman was that I could cry like I was being pulled over by the cops and get out of a ticket with the Iranians. And yet she's going to be at the top of whatever diplomatic superstructure we have forever and ever and ever. Minouche Shafik is very similar in that way. And that this is, all right, so today I'm the governor of the Bank of England. And yesterday I was the president of the London School of Economics. And this, and these are all things she's done. It's a wonderful resume, but these people are walking resumes. And what happens is you just get hired because you get hired. You get hired because
Yeah.
you keep getting hired. So you keep
Right.
getting hired. And so I think that she just realized that why would I eat for one day more? Why would I absorb any of this? I don't have to. I
Yeah.
can be hired anywhere else. I'm never going to make less than six figures with a great government pension, with government pension stacking up, seven figure, whatever it
Seven
is.
figures.
I'm never going to. Why would I do this?
But okay, Martin Kramer brings up an interesting conundrum here, which we should end on. Martin Kramer, the Arabist and historian of Middle East, he says Elise Stefanik, the representative who grilled her, and to whom she was very conciliatory, right? She was the second session of college. She was her own session of college president in, when was that? April. So that was her. And she was like, butter couldn't melt in her mouth. She was trying to be incredibly conciliatory toward the House committee. And while she was speaking, they were setting up the encampment, right? While she was testifying. So whose scalp is she? Is she the scalp of Shai Davidai and people like us and the Free Beacon and everybody who has gone after Colombia for its outrageous and reprehensible behavior relating to anti-Semitism? Or is she the scalp of Students for Justice in Palestine and the encampment people? And Martin says that she's their scalp and that she's not Elisa's scalp and she's not our scalp. They got her. They made her life intolerable. They are the ones who ran her off of campus. And if that is the case, woe betide the university campuses in the next couple of weeks, where both Christine's sons and my daughter will be returning or beginning their 2024-2025 academic year. What do you guys think?
It's like the Gary Oldman scene, the famous Gary Oldman line in Leon the Professional, where he turns around and goes, "Everyone," and the people use that GIF all the time when you need to say,
Yeah.
That's my answer to whose scalp is she? Everyone got her. This is Murder on the Orient Express, and different subsets of the class of travelers can take credit for it. But this is an Agatha Christie novel, and I think it's just overdetermined.
I'm with Martin. I think they got her. I think they're the ones who made her life intolerable. They're the ones who tormented her. She did finally call the cops. The cops came. The cops arrested 31 people, and they were all
let them all walk. Yes.
So they were like, "Oh, really? Oh, you're going to get us arrested? How are you going to arrest us now? You think the NYPD is going to come and risk themselves because you call them now when they know that Alvin Bragg is going to let them loose? I don't think so.
Well, and even the
we're going to do anything we want to now.
And even the most infamous professors and students on that campus who have called, said horribly anti-Semitic things on the record, they're all welcome back in the fall, as far as we know. Columbia has not expelled that student. And as far as we know, that professor is also still going to be allowed on campus.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about Shafiq. Try to think if there's anything we missed from this week. I'm sure there are many things that we missed. Okay. Seth, very quickly, you have a recommendation. Got to do it quick.
Okay. Yes. My recommendation is Bad Monkey, the Apple Plus TV series adaptation of the Carl Hiaasen novel of the same name. It's Vince Vaughn and with Bill Lawrence producing, and it's exactly what you want from those two guys. It's Vince Vaughn at his Vince Vaughnest, but he's not sharing the stage really with anybody. So it's just but it's really kind of perfectly done. He's a detective who gets suspended and then downgraded to restaurant critic and whatever. He's a guy who can't stay out of his own way. And then this mystery arm floats up on the shore in South Florida. He's in the Keys. Some of this takes place in Miami. That also is part of every show basically that gets based in like South Florida seems to work. I'm not sure why, but it just seems to be a good place for it. But it's funny, and it's very witty, and it's very they use a narrator, which works sometimes in shows and movies. Sometimes the narrator bit works, sometimes it doesn't. Here it works extremely well. The narrator is dry but funny, and that's basically the theme of the whole show. So it's just really enjoyable. And then the other thing is that they have, because it is Florida, they have turned the show also into a kind of tribute to Tom Petty. And the soundtrack of the show is a Tom Petty tribute album, Pearl Jam and all sorts of bands covering Tom. And throughout the show, in each episode, you hear a couple of these. It's basically Tom Petty is the soundtrack to the show, but played by others. There's something very Florida man. This is like the Florida man.
Carl Hiaasen is the novel of Florida Man. Like, he is a Miami Herald columnist who has been writing these mystery novels about how psychotic Florida is now for 30 years or something like that. And so he's a little mean about Florida. It's not that crazy, but trying to remember the one where there's a serial killer going around killing real estate developers in Florida and sticking plastic alligators down their throats. That was the first one, but I don't. I think
a developer is the
developer is always the villain in a Carl Hiaasen novel.
But by the way, and the other thing, by the way, is that the monkey, the bad monkey of the title, is one of the characters has a pet monkey, and this pet monkey is like the most famous pet monkey actor. I don't even know what to say, but the monkey's name is Crystal, and she has been an actress in Hollywood for 27 years. She's been a working actress, and I couldn't help but there's something really appropriate about all this. But she has been in everything. She's George of the Jungle, one of the Hangover movies, Fableman's, Night at the Museum. Like, I pulled up
the stories she could tell.
I pulled up this monkey's Wikipedia page, and I was just entranced. And it turns out that she's this like real veteran, 27-year Hollywood veteran, the great monkey actress, the great capuchin actress, Crystal. So that's the other.
By the way, I should mention, I've never done this before, but just it's not breaking news because it happened yesterday, but I feel like we need to mention it because it's just so delicious. So easily the worst newspaper presence in America in the last 10 years has been the writer Taylor Lorenz, who has gone from the New York Times to the Washington Post, a vicious, dishonest, disreputable, monstrous, psychopathic person who now apparently has been caught out in a gigantic lie that I think is going to cost her job finally.
Well, she's been caught out in lies many times. This one, actually, she lied to her boss directly. Well, so now she's in trouble.
So my friend John Levine of the New York Post discovered that on her private Insta, she had taken a picture of herself, Natch wearing a mask, because I don't know that she has many diseases, and everybody is mean for not staying inside 24 hours a day so that she is safe from their depredations of their germs. They took a picture of herself, and Biden is in the background, and she wrote "war criminal" as the caption on the picture and sent it to her friends on her private Instagram. And somehow John Levine got a hold of this, contacted her, and she said, like Anthony Weiner, that she had been hacked. And Joy Reid, I think, also said that she had been hacked. And she then confessed to her boss that, in fact, she had not been hacked, that she had, in fact, done this. And
NPR ran some sort of analysis that figured it out that it wasn't.
Yes. So the point here is, if the Washington Post has a lick of sense, it will take advantage of her misbehavior to 86 her without getting sued for discrimination because she's got autoimmune and immune disorders or something, which I think is one of the reasons why they haven't dealt with her before. Not that I really know, but just keep your powder dry, remain patient. Eventually, bad people do get what's coming to them. Sometimes. Seth, of course, reveals that maybe that's not true if you are at the top reaches of our globalist class, but nonetheless. Okay, we'll be back on Monday. Thanks, everybody, for the kind words about our special podcast this week. Glad you liked them. We'll do it again toward the end of the year when we take another break. For Abe, Seth, and Christine, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.